Well, thanks, Galen. It's always good to be here. I find this to be a very unusual position. As you'll note, I never stand still in a presentation, and again, being a self-preservationist, I find it very good being an economist that I'm able to move to make it a harder target to shoot at. What I'm going to talk about today is this publication that came out in October called The Economics of Irrigation Systems. It's a very interesting publication. I think you're going to find that, you know, if they had a vote, you'd find that this is probably the best publication of this type to come out in 2011. I don't say that just because I was one of the authors, although I think that contributes. But probably because it was the only one that came out across the country in this, dealing with this subject. So what we're going to talk about, and we're going to look at some of the different systems. Of course, we're talking about furrow, and again, whether it be polypipe or traditional. MESA is one of the systems that's evaluated, the mid-elevation and then the low-elevation spray application, and how these systems compare. And of course, we get into LIPA as our third center pivot system that we consider, albeit with the drag socks or the bubble mode. And then finally, we look at subsurface irrigation. And what we're doing here is doing an economic comparison of how these things match up. You know, and trying to take any biases you have out of it. So when we look at the investment, and I'm going to get right into it, investment and benefit cost analysis. And again, in this publication, I can't cover half the stuff, and I'll get around to it later on. But first of all, just to kind of set the parameters what we're talking about. When we look about it, and the thing I want you to pick up here is the application efficiency that we assumed for the different systems. Furrow at 60%, MESA at 78, LISA at 88, LIPA around 95, and then subsurface drip at 97. And this becomes one of the keys, especially as we get into the limited water. Now, what we did is set up, and this is similar to what we did in 2000 when the original publication came out. High water use and intermediate water use and low water use to kind of evaluate it at 3 different levels of pumping. Set LISA in there as the standard and then measured the indexes from there. So basically, we set the high water use at 20 acre inches a year, 14 on the intermediate, 8 on the light water or more drought-resistant crops. And then when we go ahead and index these application efficiencies to get the same water effectively to the crop, we're talking about 30 inches under the furrow, giving that 60%, or down here for the drip about 18, okay, to get you basically the same water to that crop. Now, on the investment costs, went ahead and estimated these, and again, these are broken down per acre. You can find the gross investments in the publication. We had about $208 in the furrow, $556 in the quarter mile center pivot now, and $1,200 in the drip. This is the only time we even throw in anything about the center pivot half mile. I won't talk about this, but there's economies to scale associated with this. And that's one thing to keep in mind. If you can put a half mile system on rather than 4 quarters, go ahead and do it, because you drop your investment costs substantially. Now over here is the net investment, and this basically looks at, takes out the salvage value, takes out the tax consequences. So I guess this goes back to the nature of America. If you're doing well, paying more taxes, the systems actually become cheaper. So at the 28% tax rate, you can see what this net investment per acre is. If you haven't been doing as well and paying that 15% tax rate, this is the tax advantages associated with it. And this is what becomes your net investment. Now, go ahead and basically notice that this is the fixed and variable cost per acre inch and the intermediate water use. So when we're talking about, and again, we define that as sorghum soybeans. You know, you can put sorghum in the low water use, you can put it in the intermediate water use, depending on how you want to irrigate it. But that's just kind of an example. Soybeans is a definite fit in here. Estimated the depreciation, the taxes, insurance, interest on investment to give you the total fixed cost of each of these systems per per acre inch of water applied, assuming that 350-foot lift. Now, I want to get down here. You can see the fuel, lube maintenance, repairs, labor, and total variable cost per acre inch. Well, these three. Now, this is one of the things I want to talk about. When you look at this, keep in mind, last time was 10 years ago when we did this publication. So what I assumed here, or had them work through, is looking at natural gas at $6 per acre inch. Because I'm figuring it'll be another 10 years before this publication is done. And the other thing I can tell you is I won't be doing it in 10 years. But the point becomes, the element R is directly related to the fuel charge. So if you think about it, and we're sitting at 4, you'd be down here, take about 2/3 of that, 2/3 of that, so this cost would be somewhat less, okay? And those are the type of adjustments you always have to make, because you're always dealing with a point in time when something like this is put together. So then we're talking about probably more in the $8 to $14 range, depending on which system that you have, by the time you include the fixed costs and the variable costs on these things. Now, one of the things we looked at, okay, now is just the natural gas fuel. And again, under the 3 crop scenarios, the high water use, intermediate water use, and low water use, and this is how it plays out, because you remember you're putting more water under the furrow system, so we're looking at various costs, and again, this is total pumping costs. Okay, so that's both fixed and variable, what it's going to look like, okay, under these different systems. And as you expect, when you get down to the pumping, obviously, is what you get down is the more efficient the system, the lower the cost as far as total cost. Now, savings and pump cost. Now, one of the things we do, everything's measured basically from the furrow system. So what we did here is we took that savings and pump cost coming over here from the furrow, okay, relative comparison. So we took the MESA, this difference right here, going backwards, and that's that. We added in a savings of approximately 3 field operations, a furrow opening, bedding, etc. You have less operations, field operations associated with either the pivot or the drip systems to get to an annual irrigation savings, okay? Now if we look at the net investment cost, and then we took the benefits of the irrigation technology over the 3 water use scenarios. So if you think about it, here's these investment costs, looking at the savings in fuel that you achieve over the lifetime of that system, discounted back, okay, gives you the net benefit. So it's fuel, and it's also dealing with fuel lubricant, and it's also dealing with the savings in field operations, okay? So if you look at it, here's the net investment cost. So if we look at it just from, let's go from the furrow to the LISA, okay, that's 183 to 467. The change in investment is 283, okay? And we did not show, at the time the person I had pricing the irrigation systems, they said, we don't care. When the new system goes on, we will put it on with whatever they want. It's all the same cost, whether that holds or not. But the point becomes, as you look at this change in investment, and then you can look at the net benefits over the life of that. So basically, to go from furrow to LISA or LIPA, okay, let's go to LISA. We can expect under a high water use crop that you'd be saving discounted savings of about $1,500 versus that increase in cost, $283. Low water use, $270 or $870 versus $283. Okay, even on the drip, on the high water use, moving from furrow, from an energy standpoint, we're not evaluating any changes that could occur from increases in production. Basically, drip is preferred over furrow on the high and intermediate water use. Okay, so what's that telling you? Basically, you'll be better off to change out that furrow system one place or the other, whether you're going to a sprinkler or for going to drip, especially if you're on a high value crop. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things I'm punching over on this thing, but again, I wanted to make sure I've been warned that I have to stay within my time. Okay, so what we did is just to show you a few more things. We did sensitivity analysis looking at various fuel costs, pumping lifts, fixed cost, labor cost, and to show you there's a basic theme that seems to come out. Under this one, we look at the fuel costs as we varied the natural gas costs. And the basic theme that you get is the more efficient you are, whether it be down here at the LIPA or the drip, the less susceptible you are to changes in fuel costs. The less it will affect your bottom line, okay? The more efficient you are, the more insulation you have against rising fuel costs or changing fuel costs. If we looked at it versus lift, it's the same type of scenario. The deeper the lift that you have to go, moving from 150 to 550, the more savings you will get by going to the higher efficiency systems because you're having to pump less on this, okay? So 169 going from 29, or from 130 to 268 as you move up in lift under the furrow, whereas 86 under the drip up to 169. Those differences become bigger. Again, insulates you from the variation in pumping lift. Here's kind of the paradox, and I almost took it out this time. This looks at what the fixed cost is per acre inch, and basically the bottom line comes out that as you move from furrow, the more you pump, the lower your fixed cost per acre inch is, and the same way, so the paradox becomes, especially as you get into the more efficient systems such as the center pivots and the drip, one of the things, the more you can push through the system, the lower you can cut that investment cost. A little bit of irony from what you're trying to do, and that's save water. Now, labor costs, same way, parameterizing the wage rate from 10 to 18, you'll see some savings because again, you're pumping less through these other systems. And of course, obviously furrow, especially if you're moving pipe, has a fairly significant labor cost. So again, it's the same type of scenario. The more efficient it is, the more you are able to insulate yourself from shocks, albeit labor, lift, fuel.